Hey everybody, so in this next lesson we are going to be looking at a number of different ways to display data and also how to find a part of the whole data to represent what percent of all the data is this segment or interval. So this will help you greatly, not only on some tests but also in life. I'm going to jump right into it, and then in class we can talk a lot more about how we can apply these to some major test questions. Okay, so if we take a look here, it says make a frequency table and histogram of the following grades. So let's imagine that here is, here we go. Here is the grade set for a teacher's last exams. So if you notice, the information is listed in descending order, meaning the highest number is on the top, and then it goes down or decreases to the lowest score. Okay, so we can see that our range is from 96 all the way down to 61, so between there. And that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start right here where it says range. What is the range of my data? Well, my range goes from 61 all the way up to 96. What would be that spread? You could subtract that out and find out what is the spread there. You would do 96 minus 61. You'd get roundabout 6 minus 1 is 5. 9 minus 6 is 3. That's your spread, I'm going to call that. Okay, but you could call the range 35 as your range. That's the difference in numbers, 35 points apart from the highest to lowest score. Or you can call that the spread is 35 and your range is from 61 to 96. So then we would have to come up with, well, what should our intervals be? Sorry about that, the title. So what could we title this? We could title this chart of grades, whatever you want. So we can do this grade analysis. I'm going to put grade analysis. Okay, I don't know if I spelled that right. I'm pretty sure I did. So we have our range, and then we have our intervals. Intervals are basically what segments are we going to use to break up our data. And in this one, I'm going to say our intervals are going to go by 10. So by tens. And write that in like that. So what that means is my grades or my intervals are going to go from 90 to 99. So those are all your A's. From 80 to 89, those are your B's. 70 to 79, those are your C's. And then 60 to 69. So that's how we fill in our grades here. These are the intervals that we're going to use in order to go back and complete our data. So there's a few things that I want to look at. I can go through the total first. I can go through the tally first. I'm going to start with the tally, and I'm going to total this up in a minute, and I'll tell you why. So tallying means that we're going to make tally marks. This is an important skill to have, and there's a way that we do this. So the way we do the tallies, so from 90 to 99, we have a 92, a 95, and a 96. So I say 1, 2, and 3. Now, from 89 down to 81, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I say 1, 2, 3, 4. A cross line makes my fifth for my tally marks. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the number that stands for 9. Okay, and let's continue here with the tally marks for the 70s. So here's our cutoff for scores within the 70s. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So how would I do that? Okay, I would make 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and my cross makes a 5, and then one extra makes a 6. Okay, sure you've seen this before. And tally marks with the 60s, we have 2. Okay, so this is how it looks like when we have tally marks. Let's go ahead and just write the numbers in to the number column here. So that's 3. This was 9 because I have 5 and a 4. This was 6 because I have 5 and a 1. And this one is just a 2. Okay? Next, it's asking us to write this as a fraction. So, fractions have a numerator and a denominator. So there'll be a number on the top and a number on the bottom of the fraction bar, a numerator and a denominator. So fractions are always a part. So the part is on top and the whole is on the bottom. Well, the whole in this case is all of these test scores. So we need to know a total, how many test scores were there. So let's count. So we have, let me do it this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then 20. So down here, you can put in a 20, and that's our whole amount. So that's going to be our denominator in all cases here, where we're going to put, out of 20, there were 3, so I would say 3 out of 20 people scored an A, or somewhere in the 90s. So how would that look for the 80s? So here, well, 9 people out of how many? 20, because there's 20 scores, scored in the 80s. And so follow that same pattern for the 70s. We have 6 people out of 20 people. And then finally, in the 60s, 2 people out of 20 people. So that is a way to figure how many out of the whole. The part over the whole. So how many out of, we can say 3 out of 20. Now, in order to find a percent, we actually have to convert this to a decimal. Let me grab my calculator and show you how this works. So here, I can take my calculator and I can just put in 3 out of 20. So the fraction bar itself means divided by. So I would put 3 divided by 20, and I get 0.15. All right, I'm going to write that one down here. So first, that equals 0.15 as a decimal. So what is 0.15 as a decimal? Well, in order to change, as a percent, in order to change your decimal to a percent, you'll have to times that by 100. So I take my 0.15 and I'm going to do times 100, and I get, actually now, just 15. I think that might be backwards in the camera, not sure. So that means 15%. There is a shortcut where you can just move the decimal point 2 spots to the right. All right, wherever your decimal point falls, if you move it 2 spots to the right and make a percent sign instead, that's how you can find your percent. But you can always find your percent by getting your decimal and timesing it by 100, because that means per, and cent means 100. So per 100 times the 100. Okay? So let's see how that looks for 9 over 20. So I take my calculator. I'm going to put 9 divided by 20. And that gives me 0.45. 0.45. And so can you take a guess? What is that percentage? So I can take the decimal point, move it over 2 spots, drop it, and make a percent sign. Or I can take that 0.45 times a 100 and get 45. And that's my percentage. So following along for 6, 6 divided by 20 is, I like this one here. So this one is going to be, here we go, equals 0.375. This one is very good to see because, I don't know if that's backwards, but 0.375 times 100 is still going to give me a decimal left in my answer, 37.5. The same thing is, if I was here, I would go over 2 spots, boom, keep that decimal. So it would be 37.5 because it went over 2 spots, then add my percent. That means 37.5. If you have $37.5, you have $37.5. So 37.5%. And last, 2 divided by 20 is 0.1. So how does that translate over if I wanted to do over 2 points to the right? So I'd go 1, and I'm missing something here, another place value. So I can go over 2, 1, 2. So if there's nothing there, I'll put in a 0. So that would make it actually 10%. Okay, 10%. So another way you can look at that, take your 0.01 in the calculator times 100 gives you the number 10, which would be a percentage, 10%. All right, so this here was a summary of creating your frequency table, how often each score was presented in each interval category, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. All right. The next thing and the last thing that you'll have to do is to take this information and go ahead and create a histogram. So we did the frequency table portion of it. That's kind of messy. Now we have to make a histogram of this information. So let me scroll down here, show you exactly how that is done. Grab my mouse and boom. Let's scroll. Trying to scroll down. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to lose some of our data. Let's remember our numbers here. I'm going to close this out. 3962. 3962. We'll have to go back to it if we can. So we're going to make the graphs. We're not going to make this circle graph today. That happens to be on this sheet. But I do want to go through and make this one here is going to be our histogram. Now, the way this is set up, I'm going to give you some guidance here. This bottom is going to be your interval. So I'm going to quickly write in here 90 to 99, 80 to 89, 70 to 79, and 60 to 69. So that was our intervals. And going up the side, I'm going to call this the y-axis actually. I'm going to call this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Because I think I'm going to need all of those to be able to complete this table right here. All right. So now looking at this, how many scores fell between 90 and 99, if you remember from our data? So you can look back. I'm not going to scroll up. I've already deleted all the information, but I can tell you that we had 3. So for my 3, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in this right here with 3. I'm going to shade it here because that's going to give me a little bit easier way to mark this. So there were 3 in this score interval. All right? Now, going back to the 80 to 89, how many were in our score interval for 80 to 89? I'll remind you we had 9. So that actually fills up this whole grid, all of them, all the way up to 9. And I'm having a great time coloring this in. Now, if you're using a pencil or a pen, you may want to make one dots and one vertical stripes, one, I don't know, horizontal stripes, so that you can differentiate each of the intervals. In a histogram, remember, each category is going to touch, each block of information is going to touch to the previous block. So we're not just making bars that are independent of each other. Okay? So in the 70s group, we had 6 scores that were in the 70s. So I'm going to fill in up to the 6th line. Boom, boom, boom. And then in the 60s, we had only 2 people who scored in the 60s. Do that in the orange. So I'm just going to fill to the 2 line. So this is what my histogram would look like when I am complete. Now, I said we're not going to do the circle graph today, but if you did want a hint on how you would complete that, what you would do is you would have to use your percents for your circle graph. Okay? So the whole thing is 100%. Half of it is 50%. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So actually 45% is going to be like around about here. So we had 45% of the people score in the 80s. Actually, I should make that the same color. I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm giving you an example of how this would look. 45% of those would be